The question that I have is like, who made Candace Owens the authority on faith? What is the true faith? What is the real faith? What is the ardent faith? And now she stands sort of as, queen religion, able to determine not only what is the right religion, but she can posthumously determine that a person was converting to Catholicism.
Right.
Guys, it's a bit of a problem for me. And so much so that I just feel like we just need to do an episode specifically on this, because I feel like she is in death. And this, man, how disrespectful. In death, she is faith shaming Charlie Kirk. Faith shaming Charlie Kirk.
But can I play the original? Okay, so this is her responding to one of her podcast listeners' comments on the E. Michael Jones, Protestantism is rooted in Satanism. And I want you to listen very carefully to how Candace responds to this. And you'll see, again, Candace Owens needs to and must apologize to Protestants. It's not enough to just backpedal your statement and say we're all Christians. When you were 2 seconds ago Catholic gang and talking about Charlie Kirk being too smart to be a Protestant, and then also this response to a listener who in humility was asking you a question, and it was like, put my heart in your hand, and then you just
Writes, love your work, Candace. In your interview with E. Michael Jones, he said Protestantism comes from Satanism. I attend a Protestant church. I don't fully align with either side. What's your view on gospel-believing Protestants? So obviously, you guys know I can't judge because I was a Protestant not too long ago. And what I would say is I very much accept now, on the other side of this thing, that the more that you study history, you move very quickly away from Protestantism, because you start to notice that it has always been hijacked as a political movement. And I hope that in watching this podcast series, as we cover a lot of these topics, that you'll start to realize how exactly Protestantism was hijacked for political sake. As certainly while we are covering the topic of Israel, and we are seeing all of these churches and these ministers get on stage and don't listen to Tucker Cans and Tucker and Candace Owens, whatever I'm being called out there, you go, okay, what is that?
You heard Candace Owens. Being a Protestant is equal to being a Satanist. What does being a Protestant mean? Protestantism was when Europe split from the Roman Catholic Church. It was a religious reformation that happened in the late 1400s to the early 1500s, around the time that America was first founded by anybody from Europe. There was a German priest named Martin Luther. He was a theologian, that is the study of biblical texts. He wrote hymns, he was a professor, and he was a former friar. He is still, to this day, widely regarded as one of the most influential figures in Western and Christian history. Why? I'm going to tell you why. Luther's theology challenged the authority and office of the Pope and bishops. His teaching specifically stated that the Bible is the only source of the divine. That there should be nothing, not a language, not a book, not a bishop, a cardinal, a priest, a pope, in between religion and the people. This is the justification that any human acts or intent, or merit rather, is received only as the free gift of God's grace through the believer's faith in Jesus Christ, and that human beings do not have to answer to an authority. And not only that, but the Pope's authority. Nowhere does it say in any biblical text that any queen, any princes of the land, kings, or their heirs have to answer to that Pope authority before God. They are anointed by God, meaning that they should not have to answer to a Pope. And you know what they say? Knowledge is power. That's why in the priesthood, they were the only ones that learned the language of Latin, because by this time, Latin was considered a dead language, meaning that there were no born native speakers since the Roman Empire had fallen. You have to be taught Latin. And then from there, the people that attend church are told what this beautiful, ancient, biblical script and text says, because it is mostly written in Latin. Now, we know Jesus of Nazareth spoke Aramaic. We also know that he was Jewish, and we know Jewish people today can speak Hebrew, Yiddish, and Arabic. The history of Israel is a whole different topic, a whole different video, a whole different series for a totally different day. Martin Luther, however, decided that he was going to translate the Bible into his native language of German. Very similar to what William Tyndale did in modern English times when he decided he was going to secretly take the Latin Bible and translate it into English. And this act alone was something that would not only have you condemned, tried, but have your life taken with your head stricken from your body. You could have been hanged, quartered, and drawn for doing this. This is the religious Reformation. It not only happened throughout Europe, but it started in Germany and it spread all the way to England. The little island of the UK is comprised of England, Wales, Scotland, and then you have the island of Ireland, not too far. But of course, during the time of Jesus, all of this in yellow, this was owned by the Roman Empire all the way up to Britain. The Roman Empire not only occupied all of Judea during the time of Jesus, but this is modern day Italy today, who owned all of this, even down by Egypt. Of course, forward 1,500 years into the future, we have men like the German priest Martin Luther, who, by the way, I am going to add, changed his views on excluding certain things out of the Bible that were not included in the Jewish Bible, but then later changed his views on that, later expressing some anti-Semitism, which he hadn't done before. But then we also have the British William Tyndale. Now, Latin today is still used by the Roman Catholic Church. It is the official language of Vatican City. It's also used in science and in medicine and in scholarly pursuits. But Martin Luther was so revolutionary because he challenged the Catholic Church's practices and authority, emphasizing salvation by faith alone, and that the Bible was the ultimate spiritual authority, which directly led to the invention of the printing press. This is based solely on the fact that not only does everybody have the right to read the Holy Bible in their own language, meaning having it translated, but that you have a right to have and hold that sacred text. That you don't have to have a friar, a monk, a minister, a priest, a pope, a cardinal, a bishop, etc., be a mediator between you and that sacred text, giving the church less control. Now, this is where different denominations of Christianity is born, including Protestantism. What divides these different denominations of Christianity is their particular Bible. The Protestant Bible has 66 books. King Henry VIII of England is famous for having 6 wives. Catherine of Aragon was his longest wife, and she gave birth to their daughter Mary. She was Catholic. He then married Anne Boleyn, who was a Protestant. Jane Seymour, a Catholic. Anne of Cleves, a Protestant. Catherine Howard, a Catholic. And his last wife, Catherine Parr, was a Protestant. Even all 3 of his legitimate children were different religions, even though he was a devout Catholic his entire life. During King Henry VIII's first marriage to Catherine of Aragon, his longest wife, even though she bore him 8 children, only one of them lived to adulthood, and that was their daughter, Mary. He wanted to divorce Catherine of Aragon because he fell in love with his second wife, Anne Boleyn, and wanted to marry her. But the Pope would not grant him a dispensation to divorce Catherine of Aragon and would not accept his excuses for why the marriage was null and void to begin with. When the Pope said absolutely not, and Catherine of Aragon said, yes, this is my one and only husband, and I was a maid the night we married and consummated our marriage under God, when he didn't get what he wanted from the Pope, his divorce from Catherine of Aragon, he broke from the Catholic Church and created his own church called the Church of England. He then took all of the Catholic monasteries all throughout England, Wales, and Scotland, and took all of their money, gold, silver, assets, and took it. He consolidated all of that wealth for himself. Now, this was said to have been brought on because Anne Boleyn likely showed him that secret little book that William Tyndale had written, the Holy Bible translated into English. And then he had a subsequent book that he wrote called The Obedience of a Christian Man. The book, The Obedience of a Christian Man, told King Henry VIII everything that he wanted to hear as king. And this also justified him breaking from the church's authority and hierarchy to then create his own. William Tyndale also contended that the Bible is the Christians' ultimate authority, challenging the established order of the Pope and the Vatican's power, not over just princes and priests and monks and friars and ministers and bishops and cardinals, but over all of these different monarchs throughout all of Europe. Because his book, The Obedience of a Christian Man, tells you that the scriptural authority is above any pope. So the religious Reformation came down to this: the importance of accessing the Bible in your own language, and the idea that Christians are saved by grace through faith, demonstrating that salvation and obedience to God and God's laws. The different denominations of Christianity come from different ideas, different Bibles, different books of biblical texts that are included or excluded from said Bible. Not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people throughout Britain and Europe have been put to death for their religious beliefs and for this religious reformation, for the belief that they have the right to have the Bible in their own language and that they have the right to hold it and to read it, that they don't have to answer to a king or a prince or a bishop or a priest or a pope, but to God directly through the teachings and the scriptures in said Bible. Now, different variations for over 2,000 years of the Bible have changed and come about. And that has largely to do with different Catholic Christian denominations. Now, the Catholic Bible includes this: 46 books of the Old Testament, 27 books of the New Testament. So Catholics and Protestants share the same 27 books in the New Testament, which includes the 4 Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, the letters of Paul, other letters, and the book of Revelation. Now, the difference is the Protestant Bible has 66 books total, and the Catholic Bible has between 71 and 73. And that has to do with certain things in the Protestant Bible being pulled out because it was felt that they were not in alignment more with the Hebrew Bible to be more historically accurate. Because remember, Jesus of Nazareth was a Jewish man, but it was his life, his ministry, his trial, his crucifixion, death, and resurrection that brought about Christianity. And of course, you know the difference between Islam, Muslims, and they believe in Muhammad the prophet and how he died and ascended to heaven. The same way Christians believe in Jesus, the Messiah, the foretold Messiah. Now, Candace Owens says that Protestantism is steeped, and this goes back to her own hatred and her own bias towards Zionists, towards Jewish people, towards Jewish Americans, towards Israel, and towards Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister, who's on his, 6th term as prime minister of Israel, which means he was elected. She says that Protestantism is based in Satanism. And she used to be a Protestant. And then after she got married a few years back, she became a Catholic because that's what her husband became. But there's also what they call Gnostic Gospels. And those are a lot of biblical texts that are very interesting because they're not included in any version of the Holy Bibles. But if you want to know the most complete, the oldest version of the Holy Bible, you have to look to this. The oldest and most complete Bible right now is the Ethiopian Bible. This is why people that study theology love the Ethiopian Bible, as well as the Gnostic. The Ethiopian Bible is over 800 plus years older than the King James Version. And if you don't know, King James made his own version of the Bible. If you didn't know, he was the only child of Mary, Queen of Scots. She was the Queen of Scotland. She was also going to be, by marriage, Queen of France. But she had a rightful claim to the English throne after King Henry VIII died. His daughter, Mary, was Catholic. His daughter, Elizabeth I, is a Protestant. And his son was Protestant. Now, his son succeeded him from 9 to 15. He passes away. Then Mary comes on the throne. She's there for 5 years, and then Elizabeth reigns, which was the golden era. Now, Elizabeth never married. She never had any children, but she also signed off on the death warrant of her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, who is the mother of King James. He was the first person to be born and inherit not only by bloodline, by birthright, the throne of England, but also Scotland, which would have been a pivotal time in English history because it would have, for once, united Scotland and England. And of course, the history of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, and all of the bloodshed that happened for thousands of years. You'd have to look into that because that's a whole different series for a whole different day. But when we look at a historical context of different Bibles, the Ethiopian Bible is considered to be the best, the oldest, and the most complete Bible with 88 books, as opposed to the 66 in the King James Protestant version, or the 71 to 73 in the Catholic version. And Candace Owens wants to talk about Satanism and how all of these religions had been used for political agendas. Hello, look at the Crusades. Look at how many people in wars have been waged, how many people have died under wars, because people have decided to wage a war against another territory or another religious group, all in the name of religion. It has happened more than it has not. Even going back to ancient times, ancient civilizations, and ancient human history. But because Protestants have a more Hebrew-friendly version of the Bible, she's going to say it's steeped in Satanism. Jesus of Nazareth was a Jewish man. So in accordance to what he himself would have believed is the basis for that. And of course, you can buy the Ethiopian Bible, complete, in English, translated into English, with all 88 books. Now, is there a reason why a Catholic Pope, many times over the years, would have pulled so many of those out of their version of the Holy Bible and put them back in and pulled them back out and put them back in? Could that be for political reasons? Because all you have to do is look at the history of every single pope that ever lived, and you're going to find a lot of corruption, a lot of political agendas, a lot of money seeking, territory seeking, to have control over not only a region, but a people. Can we sit here and say today that all Catholics or all denominations of Christianity are steeped in Satanism? Absolutely not. And then she turns around and backpedals by saying something completely different, like, oh, I was a Protestant not that long ago, and I can't judge. But you just did. And then say things like, but we're all Christians. We all fall under the same denomination of Christianity. And it is argued that the reason why the Ethiopian Church has all 88 books and that they haven't been able to be pulled out by the Roman Catholic Church is because not only was their language different for so many hundreds of years, but it was largely unchanged, not only because of their native tongue, but because of Western Christianity changing. And then we also have the Oriental Orthodox Christian traditions. If you don't know, Ethiopia is an African country. Out of 195 countries on planet Earth, 54 of them belong to Africa. And this is not very far from where Israel is. So Candace Owens can talk a big game about history and Protestantism and Satanism and what religion is right. But she definitely owes an apology because what she said was absolutely incorrect and wrong. The Torah. What does the Torah say against murder? It explicitly prohibits murder. The fifth commandment, you shall not murder, is a fundamental prohibition against unjustified killing within the Torah. What does the Torah say about forgiveness? The offender's obligation. The person who has wronged another is responsible for seeking forgiveness. This involves sincere regret, an apology, and efforts to repair the damage caused. The offended party's role. The injured party has the right to forgive, but is also obligated to be open to the offender's sincere repentance and apology. Rejecting a truly heartfelt apology is considered an injustice. Now, next, let's look at what the Holy Quran says about murder. When is murder prohibited? Innocent life. The Quran emphasizes the sanctity of innocent life, stating that killing one innocent person is like killing all of humankind. Unjustified violence. The Quran forbids the killing of civilians regardless of their religion, sex, or age, and states that violence is only permitted in self-defense against armed attackers. What does the Quran say explicitly about forgiveness? Divine mercy. Allah is described as the all-forgiving, most merciful, a quality Muslims are encouraged to embody. Human duty. The Quran calls upon believers to forgive those who have wronged them, often linking this to the reward of being forgiven by Allah. For one's own sins, seeking forgiveness requires sincere repentance, which involves remorse, a resolve to change, and sometimes repairing harm done to others. Practicing forgiveness fosters empathy and spiritual growth, preparing believers for the afterlife by purifying their hearts and fostering community harmony. The Holy Bible. What does this book say explicitly about murder? The commandment, you shall not murder, is central, appearing in the 10 Commandments in Exodus and reinforced throughout Scripture. God's authority. Only God has the ultimate authority to take a life, and murder is seen as usurping God's authority. The last person that tried to usurp God's authority fell from heaven and became Satan. Unjustified versus justified killing. The distinction is crucial. Murder is unjust killing, but the Bible allows for justified killing in specific contexts, such as self-defense, lawful warfare, capital punishment for heinous crimes. The underlying motive, intention, and justification determine whether an act is killing or murder. So what does the Holy Bible say about forgiveness? Abundant and unconditional. God's forgiveness for humanity is abundant, unearned, and demonstrated through Jesus' sacrifice, offering redemption and the forgiveness of sins. When God forgives, He removes our transgressions from us as far as the east is from the west. Christians are called to reflect God's compassionate nature by extending forgiveness to others. Jesus taught that our own forgiveness from God is conditional on our willingness to forgive others, as highlighted in Matthew 6:14-15. The Apostle Peter had inquired about the number of times that one should forgive, and Jesus replied that one should forgive not just 7 times, but 70 times 7, or an unlimited number of times. As many times as one asks for forgiveness, it should be granted. When we look at Hinduism, Hinduism fundamentally opposes murder. In Hinduism, you are supposed to practice nonviolence and the concept of karma. Killing any living being is seen as a bad deed that will result in negative karmatic consequences, and those consequences will hinder the spiritual journey of the soul. Hinduism has a broader tradition that promotes non-harming thoughts, words, and deeds towards all living creatures. They believe in the eternal soul and that the soul reincarnates after the body dies. Murder prevents the soul from its spiritual journey, and the negative actions create a cycle of suffering on the perpetrator. In Hinduism, it is also encouraged to forgive. Forgiveness is considered a divine quality that spiritually minded people should aspire to. It frees the individual from negative thoughts and emotions, leading to personal bliss and peace. Forgiveness means letting go of anger and resentment, even if one doesn't forget the offense of the wrongdoer's actions. Practicing compassion and forgiveness is seen as a fundamental way to connect with the infinite, fostering a sense of unity with others. Forgiveness is integral to living a dharmatic, moral, and ethical life, which promotes the well-being for both the individual and the community. Balance with prudence. While forgiveness is encouraged, it is not indiscriminate. It is acceptable to forgive emotionally, but still use intelligence and take necessary countermeasures if the person remains a threat. Not only must one forgive others, but one must also seek forgiveness for wrongs committed through practice, like charity, purification, rituals, and introspection. It also states that the role of God's will is to not seek revenge unnecessarily, which also leads to inner peace. When we look at Buddhism, it says that Buddhists consider murder a severe moral violation, primarily because it contravenes the first precept, which is to abstain from taking life. This prohibition stems from a fundamental practice of compassion for all sentient beings and the recognition of life's value. The act of killing has significant negative karmatic consequences. Murder, premeditated murder, is a serious offense, and even celebrating or encouraging killing carries negative karmatic repercussions. Buddhists also explicitly believe in forgiveness. It says that for Buddhists, forgiveness is fundamentally for the forgiver, a way to free oneself from the pain, anger, and mental poison of holding a grudge. Forgiving cultivates inner peace. It breaks the cycles of hatred. It promotes spiritual growth. In Buddhism, the process of forgiveness, understanding the root of suffering, developing wisdom and compassion. A key insight is that suffering, including resentment, arises from within the mind, not just from the actions of others. Practicing loving kindness, cultivating goodwill towards all beings, including those who have caused harm, is a core aspect of forgiveness. Letting go. The practice involves intentionally choosing to let go of the pain and the desire for retaliation, not by denying the past, but by no longer being defined by it. Forgiveness is an act of caring for your own well-being, not just for a favor to the person who caused the harm. It is not a weakness. Forgiveness demands courage and integrity to face and release painful emotions. The mind's role. The practice involves changing your relationship with your own thoughts and emotions, allowing for a shift in perspective. That shift in perspective is critical to all faiths because you cannot be obedient to God and carry God's will if you allow your own thoughts and feelings to control and dictate you. And sometimes thoughts can control feelings and feelings can control thoughts. So it doesn't matter what faith you may hold or if you hold no faith. The ethics, the values, the morals of not only not killing, but coming to a place where you grant forgiveness to those who ask for it and even sometimes those who do not. That fact and truth is explicit across all faiths, and depending on the circumstances, there are religions that do believe that capital punishment serves as a consequence to committing first-degree premeditated murder in a heinous way.